You want to know what the engine room of a boutique investment firm actually looks like. It does not look like those slick traders in the movies with their suspenders and champagne toasts on the trading floor. It does not look like the mahogany boardrooms with the Picasso prints and the crystal decanters of aged scotch. No. The engine room of this industry looks like a fluorescent lit office in Midtown that smells like stale takeout, cold sweat, and the distinct metallic tang of a margin call waiting to happen. It looks like me, Evelyn, staring at 6 Bloomberg terminals at 5 a.m., nursing a cup of coffee that tastes like it was filtered through a tax document, praying that the Asian markets do not tank before our Tokyo position closes. For 15 years, I have been the senior risk analyst at Whitmore Capital Partners. That is a fancy title for professional catastrophe calculator. My job is simple. I take the mathematical chaos of managing $2.3 billion in client assets across global markets, and I make sure we do not accidentally blow up the entire fund. I am the invisible guardrail. I am the reason our portfolio does not crater when volatility spikes. I am the reason we survived 2008, 2020, and every flash crash in between. The system we use is called risk matrix. It sounds sophisticated, right? Like something a quant fund would brag about at a Davos panel. In reality, risk matrix is a patchwork monstrosity of Excel macros and custom algorithms written in 2006 by a contractor named Gerald, who probably died of a heart attack during the financial crisis. It is held together by digital baling wire, deprecated code, and a series of proprietary models that I, and only I, know how to calibrate. It is a temperamental beast. You treat it right. You feed it clean data and proper parameters, and it hums. You look at it sideways, or God forbid. You try to update the formulas without understanding the dependencies, and it will spit out risk numbers so wrong they could bankrupt a sovereign nation. This particular Thursday started like every other Thursday for the last decade. I walked into the analytics suite, the hum of the cooling systems vibrating in my fillings. The carpet is that industrial gray that was probably blue once but is now the color of crushed ambitions. I sat down at my workstation, the command center, which is actually just a standing desk with a broken motor that I claimed from the remodel 3 years ago. "Morning, sunshine," grunted Howard, my backup analyst. Howard looks like an accountant who discovered bourbon. He was eating a bagel that looked like it had been through a derivatives collapse. "Do not start with me." "Howard," I said, logging in. The screens flickered to life. My reflection in the monitors looked back at me. Stress lines around my eyes deep enough to chart a yield curve. Hair pulled back in a chignon so tight it was practically a risk indicator. "How are the overnight positions sketchy?" Howard mumbled, dropping cream cheese on his tie. "Europe opened soft. Emerging markets are wobbling, and we have a variance alert on the currency hedge. It is the Thursday rebalancing lag," I said, cracking my knuckles. "I will recalibrate the correlation matrix. Just keep the trading desk informed." I typed fast. My fingers know these spreadsheets better than they know the touch of another human being. That is sad, is it not? That is the life. You trade relationships for basis points. You trade your youth for a pension that the next financial crisis will probably wipe out anyway. Within 20 minutes, I had adjusted the hedging parameters on 3 currency positions, flagged a potential liquidity issue in our credit allocation, and manually overrode the variance model before the automated system could trigger a panic sell. The warning indicator blinked off. Green, beautiful, soothing green. See, people think investment firms run on money. They do not. They run on the sheer, unadulterated paranoia of people like me who refuse to let hubris become insolvency. The market wants chaos. It wants flash crashes and liquidity crunches and portfolio managers making leveraged bets at 4:59 p.m. on a Friday. I am the wall against the chaos. By the way, before I tell you how this whole house of cards came crashing down thanks to a pair of Hermes-wearing sociopaths, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and give this a like. It is the only alpha I generate these days, besides watching my enemies get margin called. It helps the algorithm or whatever. And frankly, I need the validation because my financial advisor fired me as a client. Okay, back to the carnage. I was feeling good. I was feeling like a goddess of risk management. I had my lukewarm coffee, I had my green indicators, and I had the illusion of control. But you know what they say about the illusion of control? It is usually shattered by someone with a trust fund and an MBA they bought their way through with a library donation. At 9 a.m., the door to the analytics suite swung open. Usually, nobody comes in here unless something is imploding or someone is getting fired. The air pressure in the room actually changed. The smell of stale coffee was instantly replaced by an aggressive cloud of Creed Aventus and inherited wealth. I spun my chair around, standing there, looking like they just stepped off a yacht that was somehow also a TED Talk, were Preston and Sloan. Preston is the managing partner's son. He is 31, has the jawline of a catalog model and the financial acumen of a golden retriever. He spent the last 3 years at our London office, which I assume is code for expensing bottle service at Annabelle's while pretending to network. Now he was back, wearing a suit that cost more than my car, a title that meant nothing, head of strategic initiatives. And gliding beside him like a Bloomberg terminal with cheekbones was Sloan. Sloan was a lot. She was a former management consultant turned efficiency expert. She had eyes that could calculate your net worth in seconds, but showed no human warmth whatsoever. She was carrying a leather portfolio like it contained the secrets of the universe. Evelyn! Preston boomed, flashing a smile that was all veneers and no substance. Just the analyst we wanted to see. My stomach dropped. The same feeling you get when you see a position moving against you after hours. Preston, I said, not standing up. To what do I owe the pleasure? The espresso machine is still broken, if that is what you are looking for. Oh, no. We are not here for espresso. Sloan chimed in. Her voice was crisp, clipped, like she was billing by the syllable. We are here to observe. Preston's father thinks it is time we really understood the risk infrastructure. Optimize the operation. Optimize. I hate that word. Optimize is finance speak for fire. The people who understand the models and replace them with an algorithm that will blow up the first time markets actually move. Optimize, I repeated flatly. Well, right now I am optimizing a hedge that is preventing us from losing $40 million if the yen moves against us. So observe away. Just do not touch anything. Preston laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound, like a credit default swap unwinding. Always such a character. Evelyn, that is what Dad appreciates about you, the diligence. But we are thinking, maybe we can modernize that diligence, make it scalable. He walked over to my bank of monitors, reaching out a manicured hand toward the screen displaying the live risk matrix dashboard. Do not, I snapped. He froze. Relax, Evelyn. It is just numbers. It is not just numbers, Preston. It is a live risk model. You click the wrong cell, you might accidentally approve a position limit override. You want to explain to our LPs why we suddenly have unauthorized exposure to Turkish lira. He pulled his hand back, but his eyes narrowed. For a second, the mask slipped. The smooth finance bro vanished, and I saw the petulant trust fund kid who has never been told no by anyone who was not on his payroll. We have a meeting at 10:30. Preston said, his voice dropping. Partners conference room, be there. We need to discuss the future of the risk function. I am busy preventing the present from becoming a lawsuit. Preston. It was not a request. Evelyn. They turned and left, trailing their cloud of expensive cologne and contempt. The door clicked shut. The silence that followed was heavy, like a portfolio full of illiquid positions. Howard looked at me over his bagel. That felt ominous. Yeah, I said, turning back to my screens. The numbers blurred for a second. That felt like the beginning of a liquidation event. Howard, better update your LinkedIn. I did not know it then, but I was right. The variance alert was nothing compared to the volatility that had just walked out the door. I walked into the partners' conference room at 10:30 sharp. The room was designed for intimidation. floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Park Avenue. A conference table carved from a single piece of walnut that probably cost more than most people's houses. The managing partner, Old Man Whitmore, was not there. That was the first red flag. Whitmore was a dinosaur. A man who built this firm with a Rolodex and a lot of cold calls in the 1980s. He yelled, he threw staplers. But he understood that risk management was not overhead, it was survival. If Whitmore was absent, it meant the asylum was officially being run by the MBAs. Preston sat at the head of the table. Sloan was to his right, typing on her laptop, probably running sensitivity analysis on how to eliminate my pension. The rest of the table was filled with the nervous faces of middle management, people who had mortgages and kids in private school and were currently calculating severance multiples. "Okay, team, let us pivot," Preston announced as I sat down. He did not even look up. "We have been analyzing the operational metrics with Sloan's methodology." Sloan's methodology. I almost spit out my coffee. Sloan's last engagement was restructuring a retail chain that went bankrupt 6 months later. Now she was analyzing investment risk operations. So, Sloan started, standing up and clicking to a PowerPoint. The first slide just said alpha through efficiency in a gradient gold font. I wish I was joking. "We believe the risk function is too conservative," Sloan said, gesturing at a pie chart. "Too much overhead dedicated to unlikely scenarios. We want to streamline. Use AI to automate the routine calculations. Free up capital currently wasted on redundant analysis. That is called cutting corners." I said from my seat. Unlikely scenarios are exactly what risk management exists for. The 2008 crisis was an unlikely scenario until it happened. A few nervous shifts from the compliance team. Preston glared at me. "Amusing, Evelyn, but we are talking about modernization. For example," she clicked to the next slide. It showed our risk model architecture. "Why do we have so many stress test scenarios? It seems excessive. Our models show we can reduce the simulation count by 60% and still maintain adequate coverage." I leaned forward. The rage was starting to bubble up in my chest, hot and acidic like watching a position blow through its stop-loss. "Sloan," I said, keeping my voice dangerously low, "we run extensive stress tests because the model cannot predict what it has never seen. We stress for 2008. We stress for 1987. We stress for scenarios that have not happened yet, but could. You cut the simulations. You are telling our LPs that we are confident nothing unexpected will ever happen again. That is not risk management. That is religion. Silence. The kind of silence where you can hear the market data feeds ticking." Sloan blinked. She looked at Preston. Preston looked at the table. "Well," Preston said, clearing his throat, "that is just legacy thinking. We have more sophisticated tools now. The AI can learn from historical patterns. The AI cannot learn from events that only happen once a decade." I said, "That is the whole point. By definition, tail risks are rare. If they were common, they would not be tail risks." "Enough," Preston snapped. "The point is the risk department is bloated. We have too many people running models that should be automated. We are paying for expertise that limits our agility." He looked directly at me. "We are going to implement a new streamlined risk platform. Turnkey solution, vendor managed. So the portfolio managers can move faster without waiting for analyst approval on every position." I saw what this was. This was not about efficiency. This was about ego. They looked at me, a 51-year-old woman in a sensible blazer, carrying the institutional memory of every crisis this firm had survived, and they saw an obstacle. They saw a speed bump on their path to leveraged glory. They hated that I could say no to their trades. They hated that they needed my sign-off. So they decided they did not. For the next 2 weeks, the optimization began. It was a bloodbath. They fired Martin, the quantitative analyst. Martin had a bad hip and a worse attitude, but he could spot correlation breakdown in his sleep. They replaced him with a SaaS platform that immediately miscalculated our sector exposure by 18%. They cut the overnight monitoring function. Markets are closed at night. Preston argued. Except for Asia Pacific, which represents 28% of our international allocation. You absolute walnut. I watched it all happen. I tried to fight. I sent memos. I created risk reports. I highlighted the potential losses in red bold font with exclamation points. Response from Preston. Thanks for the input, Evelyn. Let us stay positive and trust the process. Thumbs up emoji, the thumbs up, that passive-aggressive, condescending little icon. It was the digital equivalent of burning money in front of a homeless shelter. Sloan started shadowing me. That meant she sat in my office answering emails, occasionally looking up to ask stupid questions. Why are there so many variables in this model? Can we not just use a simpler formula, like one number for risk? Because Sloan, I gritted out, adjusting a volatility parameter. Different asset classes have different risk profiles. A simple formula would treat treasury bonds the same as emerging market equities. You want to explain to the SEC why our risk disclosures are fiction. You are so defensive, she sighed, checking her phone. This is exactly the kind of resistance to change that holds organizations back. Resistance to change. The organization was about to change into a smoking crater. Everyone who understood the models was gone or terrified. The trading floor, once a place of calculated aggression, was now a casino with the guardrails removed. I went home that Friday and drank a bottle of expensive Burgundy that a client had gifted me years ago. I had been saving it for a special occasion. Watching my career implode seemed special enough. I knew they were coming for me next. I could feel it in my bones, like a market correction. They could not fire me yet. I held the keys to the kingdom. The legacy calibration protocols. The custom algorithms I wrote that translated between the ancient risk matrix system and the modern trading platforms. If I left, the translation would fail. But they did not know that. They thought it was all just math. Anyone could run the numbers. So I made a decision. If they wanted to trade without guardrails, I would let them. But first, I was going to remove the brakes. There is a specific kind of calm that comes over you when you decide to let the portfolio burn. It is not peace exactly. It is more like the silence before a market opens limit down. You know the destruction is coming. You know the positions are about to crater. But for this one moment, you just stand there and watch the futures tick lower. I stopped arguing. That was the first sign. But they were too arrogant to see it. Monday morning meeting. I just nodded. We are increasing our leverage ratio to 3-1, Preston announced, looking for pushback. Old Evelyn would have screamed. 3-1 leverage means any 8% move wipes out a quarter of the fund. In this volatility environment, that is not aggressive. That is suicidal. New Evelyn just sipped her coffee. Bold move, Preston, very alpha. Sloan beamed. See? I told you she would adapt. It is all about embracing the vision. Vision. Yeah. My vision was currently focused on engineering a controlled demolition. I went back to my desk and started the quiet restructuring. See, over the years, I had written about 400 custom formulas to keep risk matrix accurate. These were not official updates. It did not even know about half of them. They were patches, adjustments, calibrations that reflected reality rather than theory. Example. When the correlation model encountered illiquid positions, which happens every month during rebalancing, my formula automatically adjusts the risk weighting so we do not understate our exposure. Without that formula, the system just uses historical correlations that assume infinite liquidity. In a crisis, those correlations go to 1 and the model becomes useless. I did not delete the formulas. That would be illegal. That would be sabotage. I am not a criminal. I am a fiduciary. Instead, I simply consolidated them. I moved all my custom risk protocols into a single protected workbook on the shared drive. My workbook, the one tied to my active employee credentials. The logic was sound. These are my personal analytical tools. If I am employed, they update. If I am not employed, well, access is revoked. Information security protocol, right. Cannot have former employees accessing proprietary models. I spent 3 days doing this. I worked late. Sloan stopped by once, seeing me at my desk past midnight. Burning the midnight oil, she observed. Love the commitment. Just making sure everything is properly documented. I said, not lying. Making sure everything is in exactly the right place. Excellent. We have the new platform vendor coming next week for implementation. They are going to find the transition very educational. I said, by Friday, the trap was set. My legacy formulas were now the invisible foundation of every risk calculation, and the trigger was my employment status. But I needed one more thing. A paper trail, a compliance document so bulletproof it could survive an SEC investigation. I dug up an old intellectual property agreement from 2011. A dusty PDF regarding proprietary methodologies developed by employees, basically said that analytical frameworks created by an employee for workflow optimization remain the maintenance responsibility of that employee unless formally transferred to IT, with a 60-day validation period. It was a clause meant to protect the firm from liability if a quant's model blew up after they left. But the wording was vague. Analytical frameworks. Workflow optimization. My formulas were analytical. They optimized my workflow. I printed it out. I initialed every page. I filed it with the compliance archive where documents go to be forgotten. Nobody audits those files unless the regulators are already in the building. That Friday afternoon, the summons came, calendar notification, meeting with HR and strategic initiatives, 3:30 p.m. No subject line, no agenda. I knew what it was. It was the termination. I looked around the analytics suite one last time. The flickering Bloomberg screens. The gray carpet. Howard stress-eating his fourth bagel of the day. I felt a pang of loss. I love this dump. I love the numbers. But you cannot save a fund when the principals are leveraging into a volatility spike and handing you the blame for being too cautious. I gathered my things. I took my personal hard drive, empty, wiped clean. I took my framed photo of my daughter at her graduation. I took my emergency antacids. I put them in my bag. I stood up. Howard, I said. Yeah, boss. If the overnight risk report asks for a level 3 override tonight, do not force it. Just let it recalculate. Howard looked at me, confused. Okay, you going somewhere? Just a meeting, I said. Watch the Greeks. Always do. I walked to the elevator. My heart was pounding, a steady, measured beat. It was not fear. It was the adrenaline of an analyst walking into a meeting she had already modeled. I checked my watch, 3:28 p.m., the Friday close, the weekly settlement, the moment when every position locked in. Timing is everything in finance. The HR office smelled like anxiety and artificial air freshener. Preston was there, sitting behind the desk like he was chairing a board meeting. Sloan was next to him, arranging her face into something resembling sympathy. The HR director, Margaret, looked like she wanted to be anywhere else. Have a seat. Evelyn, Preston said. The chair was lower than theirs. I remained standing. I prefer to stand. Preston. My back acts up when I sit near amateur hour. Preston's jaw tightened. Let us make this efficient. We have been evaluating the risk function structure. And I asked, checking my watch. Sloan interjected. We feel that your traditional approach is not aligning with our growth-oriented vision. We need agility. We need innovation. We need optimization. Optimization, I repeated. Is that the word for firing the only person who understands the risk models? That negativity, Sloan pointed at me. It is limiting. You are operating like a regulator. I am a risk analyst. My job is to regulate risk. But please, fire me. Say the words. Preston stood up. Your employment is terminated effective immediately for philosophical misalignment. Margaret slid a folder across. 3 weeks pay. Standard release. 3 weeks. 15 years of protecting their capital. And they offered me 3 weeks. It was insulting. It was perfect. I placed my access badge on the desk. Keep the money. I am not signing your release. You have to sign. Preston said. Everyone signs. Not me. Because if I sign, I cannot consult. And you are going to need a consultant very soon. Preston smirked. You think we cannot run risk without you. We have automation. Preston, you have a platform that displays numbers I calculate. You have models that run on calibrations I built. You think you bought a self-driving car. You bought a Formula One racer and you just fired the driver while doing 200 into a hairpin. I turned to the door. Hey, Preston. The risk system runs a full recalculation at market close. That is in about 20 minutes. When the system recalculates, it looks for calibration parameters. If it cannot find them, the outputs go haywire. We have IT. Preston scoffed. Tell your father I said good luck. I walked out, took the elevator down. As the doors closed, I opened my phone. Cloud Drive app, action revoke access. Warning. Revoking access will remove shared calibration files. Continue. I pressed. Yes. Status access revoked. I walked onto Park Avenue. The air smelled like exhaust and freedom. The clock started ticking. There is a wine bar 3 blocks away called The Reserve. Leather chairs, low lighting, a sanctuary for finance people who need to decompress. I walked in at 4:15 p.m. Rough day, asked Thomas, the bartender. Permanent vacation. I said, give me whatever costs too much. I propped my phone against the candle. I did not have internal access anymore, but I had financial news alerts. 4:30 p.m. Settlement processing. Somewhere in the analytics suite, Risk Matrix was reaching for calibration files that no longer existed. 5:15 p.m. Nothing visible yet. The damage would surface Monday. I had the weekend. They had no idea what was coming. Monday morning arrived like a margin call. I slept beautifully all weekend. The best sleep I had gotten in 15 years. No 3 a.m. calls about Asian markets. No emergency hedging calculations. Just silence and the sweet anticipation of impending chaos. I took long walks through Central Park. Read a novel I had been meaning to finish for 3 years. Cooked an elaborate dinner for myself. Did not check my phone once, but Monday morning, I checked. The financial news was absolute chaos. Whitmore Capital. Faces risk model, failure. Sources report. Massive exposure miscalculations. Regulators notified of potential reporting errors. The headlines kept coming. Bloomberg picked it up by 7 a.m. Reuters by 7:15. By 8 a.m., the Wall Street Journal had a full story with quotes from anonymous sources inside the firm. The word catastrophic appeared 3 times. Howard texted at 7:45 a.m. Evelyn, what happened? The risk numbers are garbage. Every calculation is wrong. Preston is screaming at everyone. Nobody knows what to do. I replied with a coffee emoji. Then I made myself an actual coffee. The expensive beans I had been saving. 8:30 a.m. They brought in consultants from Deloitte, 4 guys in suits. They have been staring at the screens for an hour. Nobody understands your formulas. The SEC wants our VAR methodology documentation by noon, and we cannot produce accurate numbers. 8:47 a.m. Preston just threw a stapler at the wall. Sloan is crying in the bathroom. The trading desk has frozen all new positions because they do not trust the risk limits. 9:15 a.m. 3 LPs called demanding explanations. Our exposure reports showed we were hedged on the Asia position. We were not. We are down 42 million overnight on the Tokyo desk alone. Another 18 million on emerging markets, I replied with a single grimacing emoji. Then I ordered breakfast from the expensive place downstairs. Eggs Benedict. I deserved it. By noon. The situation had metastasized beyond anything they could have imagined. The Deloitte consultants had given up trying to understand my calibration formulas. They recommended bringing in a specialized quant firm, which would take weeks to source and months to implement. The firm did not have months. They did not have weeks. They had until market close to produce accurate risk reports or face regulatory action. The trading desk was paralyzed. Without reliable risk numbers, they could not size positions. Without positions, they could not hedge. Without hedges, every tick of the market was either profit or loss, completely unmanaged. The Asia desk lost another $12 million by lunch. The currency book swung wildly as the yen moved, and nobody knew their true exposure. The credit allocation, which I had flagged as a liquidity risk 2 weeks ago, started showing signs of stress as counterparties demanded margin calls. By Tuesday, the damage was catastrophic. The risk model failure had cascaded through every calculation in the firm. Like a virus spreading through a network, bad numbers infected every system they touched. Position limits that should have triggered automatic sells. They did not trigger because the risk thresholds were calculated using corrupted formulas. Trades that should have been blocked sailed through because the compliance checks relied on my calibrations. Correlation assumptions that should have flagged concentration risk. They showed false diversification because the underlying math was now garbage. The portfolio managers thought they were hedged across sectors. They were not. They were concentrated in the exact wrong places at the exact wrong time. The overnight team had been flying completely blind since Friday. Every decision they made was based on numbers that no longer reflected reality. It was like navigating by a compass that pointed in random directions. Monday losses $42 million on Asia, $18 million on emerging markets. Tuesday, another $28 million when the emerging markets position unwound violently during a currency swing. The credit book took a hit of $15 million when 2 counterparties demanded additional margin. By Wednesday morning, total losses exceeded $85 million. In 3 days, they had lost more than the firm's entire annual profit from the previous year. The LPs were in open revolt. These were not retail investors who could be mollified with a quarterly letter. These were pension funds, endowments, family offices, people who managed other people's money and had fiduciary obligations of their own. 3 demanded immediate redemption of their capital. That was $400 million walking out the door at the worst possible time. 2 more were consulting lawyers about potential fiduciary breach claims. The conversations included phrases like gross negligence and failure of risk management. The SE had opened a preliminary inquiry into risk disclosure practices. Their letter, which I saw later, asked pointed questions about the sudden departure of senior risk personnel and subsequent model failures. It was the kind of letter that made compliance officers update their resumes. The financial press was merciless. They smelled blood and they circled like sharks. Whitmore Capital risk failure exposes leadership gaps. Son of founder oversaw dismantling of risk function before collapse. Boutique firm faces existential crisis after technology bet goes wrong. One article included an anonymous quote from a former employee. They fired everyone who understood the models and replaced them with a PowerPoint and a prayer. I did not give that quote, but I appreciated whoever did. Another article compared the situation to long-term capital management. The comparison was unfair. LTCM was run by Nobel laureates who got unlucky. Whitmore was run by a trust fund kid who got exactly what he deserved. I read all of this while drinking a very nice Sancerre at my kitchen table. The afternoon sun was coming through the windows. It was a beautiful day. Wednesday evening. My phone rang. Unknown number. Hello, Evelyn. It was Whitmore himself. The old man. The dinosaur. His voice sounded like he had aged a decade in 3 days. We need to talk. I am listening. My son made mistakes. The board is meeting tomorrow. We need you as a consultant, emergency engagement. Name your terms. $1,000 an hour. Minimum 35 hours weekly. 6-month contract. Full authority over risk methodology. No interference from Preston or Sloan. I report directly to you and the board. That is highway robbery. That is the cost of expertise you spent 2 weeks eliminating. Take it or leave it. Long pause. Done. When can you start tomorrow morning? I walked back into the building at 7 a.m. Same lobby, same hideous art. But everything was different. The receptionist stared like I had risen from the dead. Howard intercepted me. Thank God. The consultants made it worse. They corrupted the historical database trying to rebuild your formulas. Because I built those over 15 years. You cannot reverse engineer institutional knowledge in a weekend. I walked into the analytics suite. 3 consultants in expensive suits were hunched over terminals, their faces illuminated by screens full of error messages. They looked like archaeologists who had discovered a tomb and realized too late it was cursed. Everybody out, I said. One of them, a senior partner type with gray temples and a Patek Philippe, looked up indignantly. Excuse me. We are in the middle of a critical analysis. Out. I repeated. Now. He opened his mouth to object. Then he saw my face. Then he saw Howard nodding vigorously behind me. They gathered their laptops and left. One of them muttered something about reporting this to the engagement manager. I did not care. He could report it to the Pope for all I cared. I sat down at my workstation. The screens were a mess of error codes and corrupted outputs, red everywhere. It looked like a crime scene. Which, in a way, it was. My fingers found the keyboard like reuniting with an old friend after a long separation. The muscle memory was still there. Every shortcut, every command sequence, every hidden pathway through the system. I cracked my knuckles, took a deep breath, and started rebuilding. First, I had to stabilize the bleeding. That meant manually overriding every automated calculation and replacing it with static estimates. Not perfect, but at least accurate enough to stop making bad trades. Then I had to rebuild the calibration layer. This was the hard part. 15 years of adjustments, corrections, and refinements. I could not recreate it all in a day, but I could recreate enough to make the system functional. I worked for 18 hours straight. Howard brought me food. I ate at my desk without tasting it. He brought me coffee. I drank it without noticing the temperature. At some point, the sun set. At some point, it rose again. I was barely aware. I was deep in the code, the numbers, the beautiful logical architecture that I had built over 15 years. By Thursday morning, the core risk calculations were back online. Not perfect, not fully calibrated, but accurate enough to produce numbers that regulators would accept and LPs would believe. By Thursday afternoon, the trading desk was operational again. They could size positions. They could manage hedges. They could stop the bleeding. By Friday close, we had recovered 18 million of the losses. Not enough, not even close. But the direction had reversed. The warning indicators blinked off one by one. Green. Beautiful. Soothing green. Howard handed me a coffee. The expensive kind from the partner's kitchen that I had never been allowed to touch as an employee. Now I could drink whatever I wanted. How did you do that? He asked. His voice was awed, reverent almost. I built it, I said. Every formula, every calibration, every connection. I know where all the bodies are buried because I buried them. The settlement came 2 weeks later. Whitmore offered a permanent role. Chief Risk Officer, equity stake. I declined. Took the consulting contract instead. 1,000 an hour. Full authority. No Preston. No Sloan. They offered Preston's corner office. I declined. Took the analytics suite. Gray carpet. Fluorescent lights. Home. Preston was exiled to Singapore. Strategic partnerships. Finance speak for we cannot fire the founder's son, but we can make him irrelevant. Sloan's contract was terminated. She started a podcast about transformational leadership, mostly ads for executive coaching. The fund stabilized over the following months. LP redemptions were managed through a structured process that I helped design. We offered favorable terms to those who stayed, and professional farewells to those who left. In the end, we retained 70% of the capital. Not ideal, but survivable. The SEC inquiry was settled with improved disclosures and no admission of wrongdoing. The regulators were satisfied that the failure was operational, not fraudulent. The compliance documents I had filed, the ones about intellectual property and maintenance responsibility, were never mentioned. They did not need to be. Everyone understood what had happened. I make more in a month now than I used to make in 4. The math was simple once I did it. $1,000 an hour, 35 hours a week, 50 weeks a year. That was $1.75 million annually. More than 3 times my previous salary. Plus I set my own hours. Plus I could say no to anyone, anytime, for any reason. I bought a place in the Hamptons, small by Hampton standards, but perfect for me. 3 bedrooms, a garden, a view of the water. I named it The Hedge. The name made me smile every time I saw the mailbox. My daughter visited last month. She asked how work was going. I told her I had become a consultant. She asked if that was better than being an employee. I told her it depended on whether you had something worth consulting about. Sometimes working late, watching the Asian markets open on my home terminal. I miss being an employee. The camaraderie of the analytics suite, the shared suffering of earnings season, Howard's terrible jokes and worse eating habits. But then I check my brokerage account, and I remember why I left, and I remember what they did, and I remember what it cost them. Competence is expensive, arrogance is catastrophic, and revenge. Revenge is just proper risk management. You identify the threat, you model the outcome, you position yourself accordingly, and you let the market do what markets do. Big thanks for watching, you beautiful contrarians. Hit that subscribe button or the next market correction might just forget your portfolio. Until next time, keep your hedges tight and your enemies leveraged.